Thick fog still covers the entire valley on the cold morning of the winter solstice, obscuring the vision of tens of thousands of soldiers camping on the southern bank of the border river. The air is so freezing that the soldiers' breath condenses into white clouds of smoke as soon as it escapes their mouths. Inside the camp of the Plains Empire, the stillness of the early morning is suddenly broken by the sound of rapid horse hooves and wild cheering sounds echoing from the other side of the river. That is the light cavalry unit of the Highland Coalition. They appear like ghosts from within the fog, wearing no heavy armor but only draping thin animal hide cloaks to maintain maximum agility. Hundreds of riders gallop close to the water's edge, hurling sharpened javelins and shooting arrows into the outpost of the Empire's army, although the damage caused is not significant. But the act of open provocation right under the nose of one of the continent's most powerful armies ignited an explosion of anger. The commanding generals of the Plains Empire, who always prided themselves on their discipline and overwhelming power, could not swallow this humiliation. Instead of waiting for soldiers to eat fully and warm up to dispel the bone-chilling cold of the previous night, the order for a total attack is immediately issued. The sound of the war horn signaling the charge resonates, tearing through the gloomy fog. Dozens of messengers ride horses along the rows of tents, screaming orders for the entire army to assemble formation to cross the river immediately. More than 40,000 heavy infantry and cavalry of the Empire, with empty stomachs and bodies still trembling from the cold, hurriedly putting on heavy iron armor. The sound of clashing metal mingling with the shouting of lower-level commanders creates a chaotic but murderous atmosphere. They believe that the enemy across the river is just a disorganized mob and will be quickly crushed under the iron heel of the famous phalanx formation. Meanwhile, on the northern bank, the Highland Light Cavalry unit, after completing the provocation mission, pretended to retreat rhythmically, stretching the enemy formation and luring the opponent into the freezing natural trap. The river water in winter rises high, flows fast and ice cold, waiting for the tens of thousands of bare feet of the Empire's soldiers to step down. The impatience for retaliation blinded the Plains generals, making them fail to realize that they were leading the entire army into a fatally disadvantageous position right from when the battle had not truly begun. The vanguard line begins to wade into the water. The bone-chilling cold immediately seeps through the flesh, paralyzing the joints. But the giant stream of people still trudges forward, heading towards the other bank where death is patiently waiting. The freezing water of the border river quickly becomes a brutal torture for tens of thousands of soldiers of the Plains Empire. As they advance deeper toward the middle of the stream, the water level rises to chest height, cold as if thousands of needles are pricking straight into the flesh. The heavy armored infantry suffer the most heavily, the weight of iron breastplates and large shields now added with the weight of water, gripping them tightly down to the muddy riverbed. A whole vast stretch of river is tumultuous with shouting and splashing sounds. The swift current pushes the formation blocks, causing the originally straight military lines to now become disheveled and chaotic. Many soldiers slip and fall into the swift current, being pulled down to the bottom by the weight of the weapons on their bodies, never to rise again. The cavalry unit is not much better off. The originally brave war horses now panic because of the bone-chilling cold, neighing loudly and rearing up, throwing riders into the water or trampling on the infantry struggling nearby. The cold not only causes physical pain, but also paralyzes the will and fighting ability. Fingers are so numb that it is difficult to tightly grip the spear shaft or sword hilt. Uncontrollable body shivering makes movement slow and clumsy. When the first soldiers manage to crawl onto the northern bank full of slushy mud, they are no longer the proud army at departure, but look more like survivors of a shipwreck. Soaked clothes cling to the body. Body weight increases significantly, draining their last remaining strength. Meanwhile, right on the dry and solid high ground ahead, the entire main force of the Highland Coalition has deployed ready for battle. Completely contrary to the miserable situation of the enemy, the Highland army has eaten their fill, been warmed by large fires all night long, and smeared oil and fat on their bodies to resist the cold. They stand there silent and disciplined, forming a solid human wall with thousands of long spears bristling towards the riverbank. The Highland generals on horseback patiently observe the wet remnants trying to regroup at the water's edge. They do not rush to attack while the opponent is still in the river, but wait until a large number of Empire troops are ashore but have not yet stabilized their ranks. This is the ruthless calculation of experienced hunters. On the Empire side, officers try to scream, urging soldiers to quickly reform the specialized square formation. But when the shields have not yet been assembled into a seamless steel wall, the sound of the Highland Army's attack horn rang out, signaling the moment of punishment beginning to descend upon the exhausted invaders. Just as the first ranks of the Empire's army managed to raise their shields to chest height, the vanguard infantry block of the Highland coalition rushed in like a flash flood pouring down from the headwaters. Two giant blocks of humans and iron slammed into each other with destructive power, creating a collision sound resonating like thunder exploding in the middle of the plain, drowning out the whistling winter wind. Thousands of spear tips shattered in the very first moment. Sharp wooden fragments flew into the air mixed with fresh blood. At the center of the battlefield, the skirmish immediately turned into a brutal meat grinder. The Highland warriors, with the advantage of abundant physical strength and innate ferocity, frantically hurling their bodies into the opponent's shield wall, using axes and long swords to slash torrentially down onto the iron helmets. They scream wildly, trying to use their body weight to push over the enemy's defensive line, turning the attack momentum into a spearhead piercing the huddled enemy formation. However, on the other side, the Empire's heavy infantry began to show why they were considered the most fearsome conquering army in the world. Although bodies are freezing and clothes are soaked and heavy, the instinct of discipline forged through hundreds of battles helped them stand firm. Commanding officers blow signal horns continuously, ordering soldiers to press their shoulders tightly against the back of the large rectangular shields, forming a seamless steel wall without gaps. From the gaps between the shields, the sharp, short swords of the Empire army continuously thrust out and retract in a rhythmic and deadly manner. Each simple but dangerous thrust aims at the unprotected parts of the opponent's body, such as the lower abdomen, thighs, or neck. The Highland vanguard falls in droves before that thorny wall, bodies piling up on each other, creating bloody obstacles right at the skirmish line. Although pushed back step by step on the slippery, muddy ground, the center army of the Empire still maintains a tight connection. They silently endure the violent waves of attacks, accepting casualties to maintain the square formation. The resilience of the heavy infantry in the center temporarily stopped the collapse momentum, creating an illusion of fragile balance on the battlefield. But they did not know that the real disaster was not in front, but was waiting to strike from both flanks. While the battle at the center is fiercely contested for every inch of ground in mud and blood, then on the two flanks of the Empire's formation, disaster began to arrive at breakneck speed. The flank protection cavalry force of the invading army, originally a source of pride with shiny armor and skillful fighting skills on horseback, now becomes the weakest link of the entire army. After having to soak in the freezing water and endure the bone-chilling winds, both their men and horses are numb. Reflexes become pitifully slow and clumsy. From the two sides of the open field, thousands of elite Highland cavalry simultaneously spur their horses to charge. They overwhelm the Empire army not only in numbers but also in physical strength and excitement. The sound of galloping horse hooves shakes the entire ground, mingling with wild cheering to create a terrifying epic song drowning out all other sounds. The Highland cavalry do not wear heavy armor. They ride on native horse breeds that are short but tough and extremely agile, allowing them to execute sharp turns that the Empire's heavy cavalry cannot keep up with. The collision takes place brutally and swiftly. The Highland riders use long, light spears to stab obliquely from dangerous angles, piercing through the gaps of the opponent's shoulder armor and neck. Meanwhile, the Empire riders try to swing heavy, long swords to counterattack, but their frozen arms no longer have enough strength to deliver fatal slashes. The Empire's war horses, panicked by the relentless attack and painful from wounds, begin to buck uncontrollably, throwing their masters onto the muddy ground, only to be trampled to death by the enemy's hooves. The overwhelming disparity in the battle position quickly turns the skirmish into a one-sided massacre. The Empire cavalry formation crumbles in large chunks. The survivors, losing their fighting spirit, turn and flee in panic towards the riverbank, trampling on even their infantry comrades who are trying to advance to find a way to escape. The chaotic scene unfolds like a nightmare, when the pride of the Empire's army is crushed under the hooves of those they once disputed as barbarians. In less than half an hour, the entire flank protection force of the Empire army has completely evaporated from the battlefield. Now the giant infantry block fighting in the center suddenly becomes naked and lonely amidst the enemy encirclement. They are like a large beast stripped of its protective skin, exposing the entire soft flank and fatal weak points, before thousands of spears and swords thirsting for fresh blood of enemy cavalry circling back from both sides. The deadly circle begins to close, and the shadow of destruction has cast its shadow over the entire invading army. While chaos is spreading from the two broken flanks, another disaster quietly strikes from behind the Empire's army, where the rear guard soldiers are still standing huddled and cold and waiting for orders to advance. From the dense forest and reeds taller than a person hidden on the left bank of the river, an ambush force of 2,000 elite Highland warriors suddenly appears. They had hidden themselves in snow and mud since the previous night, patiently waiting until the entire enemy army fell completely into the set trap. The sound of the attack horn rings out ear-piercingly from behind, causing tens of thousands of Empire soldiers to startle and turn back in extreme astonishment. Before they could regain their composure, they had to face a rain of javelins thrown incessantly from close range. Hundreds of people collapsed on the spot before they could draw their weapons, javelins piercing through the thin back armor, pinning them tightly to the cold ground. Immediately after the opening barrage, the ambush army simultaneously drew melee weapons, rushing in to slaughter those standing bewildered in the rearmost line. The surprise attack on the rear turned the Empire's formation into an irreparable mess. The soldiers in the rear, instead of supporting the front line fighting fiercely, are now forced to turn their backs to defend themselves desperately. The maneuvering space becomes suffocatingly tight. Infantry units are compressed together from four sides. In front is the enemy's shield wall. On both flanks are cavalry rampaging. And behind is the ambush army frantically slaughtering to seal off the retreat to the river. Blood stains red the puddles of standing water underfoot. The panicked screaming of recruits in battle for the first time, mingled with the growling of veterans trying to fight to the death. The square tactical formation, the pride of the Empire, is now distorted into a deformed mass of people, huddled together like a flock of sheep before the claws of a pack of wolves. Commanding officers completely lose the ability to communicate with each other. Signal flags are trampled under mud. The sound of battle drums is swallowed by the groans of the wounded. The classic tactical pincer encirclement has officially formed and closed tight. The Empire army, originally overwhelming in numbers, is now compressed into a space too narrow to unleash its power. Long spears become useless when soldiers stand close together, not even enough room to swing an arm. They are trapped in a deadly box, where every passing second is paid for with hundreds of lives under the swords of the enemy, who are encircling from all sides with burning spirit. While the encirclement is tightening and despair begins to creep into the minds of the cornered Empire soldiers, the ground beneath their feet suddenly shakes violently in intermittent rhythms. Those dull tremors were so strong that mud and water splashed up from the swamps, drowning out both the sound of clashing metal and the chaotic screaming on the battlefield. From behind the parting ranks of the Highland army, the most cruel trump card is finally played to finish the battle. 60 giant war elephants, towering like mobile towers, begin to appear from within the misty fog. Their massive bodies are covered with multi-layered thick buffalo hide armor and solid cast bronze plates, shielding almost all weak points on the body. On the back of each beast is a sturdy oak watchtower, where archers and javelin throwers are brandishing weapons, looking down at the sea of people below with the eyes of hunters. A deep and majestic horn blast sounds. 60 beasts simultaneously roar ear-splitting sounds tearing through the space, reaching high with threatening long trunks and then starting to accelerate. The ground groans under the weight of hundreds of tons of flesh and iron rushing with terrible inertia. Their target is the most elite infantry block in the center of the Empire formation. The only place that still maintains defensive order and is trying to resist stubbornly. The moment of collision creates a terrifying and unprecedented scene of destruction. The soldiers in the first row, although bravely planting spear tails firmly into the ground to create a forest of spikes for defense, are still butted flying into the air like soulless ragdolls. The shock power of the giant animal easily snaps hundreds of wooden spear shafts, crushing thick iron shields and turning the disciplined defense line into a bloody pile of rubble in just a few breaths. Long steel-tipped tusks plow into flesh, piercing through both men and horses, tossing every obstacle blocking the way. The elephant herd does not stop after the first hit. They continue to rampage straight deep into the enemy heart, trampling on fallen bodies, completely breaking the already very fragile formation structure of the Empire army. Primal fear of the giant beasts causes the morale of even the bravest warriors to collapse completely. The devastation of the war elephant herd inside the enemy formation is no different from a storm sweeping through a field of ripe wheat. The square infantry blocks, originally trained to fight against cavalry and infantry, are completely helpless before the absolute muscular power of these creatures. Each of their stomps on the muddy ground drags along the chilling sound of crushing bones of the unlucky ones who could not flee in time. The large shields, the pride of the Empire's defensive capability, are now distorted and crushed under tons of weight, becoming iron coffins burying their own masters. Not only using body weight, the war elephants also use their flexible and powerful trunks as deadly weapons. They knock down rows of soldiers, wrap around those standing near, and throw them dozens of meters away like throwing ragdolls. The sharp iron-tipped tusks continuously swing back and forth, tearing through every obstacle, leaving long dark red blood streaks on the rough grayish skin. The strong smell of blood mixed with the stench of animals and mud rushes into the nose, causing a feeling of extreme nausea and horror for the surviving soldiers. From above, Highland warriors sitting in watchtowers on elephant backs freely pour down a rain of arrows and short javelins onto the enemy's heads. In a position far higher than the reach of ordinary infantry spears, they are absolutely safe and kill with cold precision. The Empire soldiers below fall into a situation of extreme despair. They have to both dodge giant stomping feet and raise shields to cover their heads to avoid arrows shot from above. The perfect combat coordination between wild beasts and humans has turned the central battlefield area into a bloody slaughterhouse. The resilient fighting spirit of the Empire army, which helped them hold out since the beginning of the battle, begins to crumble before this primal fear. The sounds of command orders are drowned out by the panicked screaming of soldiers. Ranks begin to crack. Soldiers in the rear ranks no longer keep their positions but start pushing each other to find a way back. But behind them, they are also blocked by the enemy encirclement. The chaos spreads as fast as an epidemic, turning the most disciplined army in the world into a panicked crowd waiting for death. The encirclement of the Highland coalition has now completely closed, creating an inescapable wall of men and beasts surrounding the remnants of the Plains Empire. The battlefield space is ruthlessly narrowed, squeezing tens of thousands of people into an area so cramped it is suffocating. The soldiers in the outermost circle have to face sudden death from all directions. Long spears thrusting from the front, horse hooves grinding from both flanks, and brutal slashes from the ambush army at the rear. They fall down, piling up on each other, bodies creating a breakwater of bloody flesh and bone, but also cannot stop the storm-like advance of the enemy. Inside that deadly iron cage, the chaos has reached its peak. The once well-organized military blocks now disintegrate into small, lonely groups, desperately leaning back to resist hopelessly. The war elephants continue their rampage in the center. Each of their heavy moves creates deadly gaps, forcing the crowd of soldiers to retreat and trample on their own comrades to avoid. The sound of ribs crushing due to compression rings out dryly amidst the screaming. When soldiers in the middle layers are suffocated by the giant pressure from four sides before the enemy's sword even touches their flesh. The high-ranking generals of the Empire, who are still sitting on horseback in the center position, desperately trying to salvage this tragic situation, They swing swords and scream until hoarse, frantically ordering the remaining units to re-establish the hedgehog circular defensive formation to hold out. But their whistle signals and steel-hard commands are completely drowned in the sea of chaotic sounds of the battlefield. The ear-splitting roar of elephants, the painful moans of the wounded, and the wild victory cheers of the Highland army echoing from four sides. The majestic gold-embroidered signal flags, symbols of supreme authority and the Empire's history of 100 victories, are one by one chopped down at the shaft. The precious tattered silk sheets collapse into the black muddy swamp, trampled ruthlessly by thousands of panicked feet until the color is no longer recognizable. The air is thick with the smell of death and despair, covering the gray sky of the winter noon. Even the most experienced soldiers begin to drop their weapons, eyes listless, looking at death coming from all directions. They realize there is no way back to the cold river behind, nor any way to advance forward. The mighty army is trapped tight in a giant trap, where the only fate waiting is to be massacred. The pride of an invincible empire has completely vanished, giving way to weak survival instinct and extreme terror before the destructive power of the perfect encirclement tactic. Amidst the desperate chaos engulfing the entire army, a block of infantry consisting of about 2,000 of the Empire's most experienced veterans automatically gathered together, without waiting for orders from the generals who had lost their composure. The instinct of those who had been through hundreds of battles told them that the only way back to the riverbank was locked tight. Instead of giving up to wait for death to come slowly like sheep in a slaughterhouse, they decided to make a final bloody gamble, pouring all remaining strength to open a bloody path straight into the center of the enemy army. They quickly formed into a sharp arrow formation, discarding soaked cloaks and unnecessary items, keeping only shields and short weapons. A hoarse but deadly unison shout rang out. The suicide squad began to rush forward, stepping on the bodies of comrades and enemies to gain momentum for the charge. They are like a wounded beast, unleashing a final bite with all pent-up ferocity. The suicide spearhead slammed into the Highland encirclement with terrible impact force. The Highland warriors on the front line, who were drunk on the wine of victory, completely surprised by this frantic resistance. Dozens of wooden shields are split in two under the brutal slashes of the Empire veterans. The extremely close-range skirmish takes place uncompromisingly. When sword blades break, they use iron helmets to bash the enemy's face, using teeth to tear apart the opponent's throat, using bare hands to gouge eyes in life and death struggle. The momentum of the suicide squad is so strong that they pushed back the enemy encirclement by more than 50 paces. Blood flows into small streams under their feet, mixing with mud to create a sticky, slimy lake. The clashing sound of metal breaking bones and screaming create a creepy symphony of death. They fight not for the hope of survival, but to drag as many enemies to hell with them as possible. Their brutality causes even the most aggressive Highland warriors to falter for a moment. However, that desperate effort is quickly extinguished by the overwhelming disparity in forces. Realizing the danger at the breakthrough point, the Highland generals immediately ordered the 10 nearest warelephants to turn around. The towering beasts pounce from both flanks of the arrow formation, using trunks to knock down and feet to trample the soldiers who are busy fighting in front. At the same time, thousands of arrows from archers shot in high arcs pour down like a shower into the combat area, distinguishing no friend or foe, killing both Highland soldiers and Empire troops who are entangled with each other. The veteran block is broken, split into small groups, and then swallowed by the sea of enemy people. The last signal flags fall, covered by mud and blood. The hope of opening a bloody path vanishes into smoke, leaving a deadly silence gradually covering the last pockets of resistance. The deadly storm finally subsided as the weak sunlight of the late afternoon began to hide behind the snow-capped mountain peaks. The chaotic noise of swords and spears and screaming fades away, giving way to a creepy silence. Only the sound of wind whistling through the ravines and the cawing of crows, signaling the beginning of a lavish feast, can be heard. The border river where the tragedy began in the morning has now turned into a dark red flow, thickened by the blood of tens of thousands of lives that have fallen, washing away floating corpses towards the distant downstream. Across the vast field, the ground no longer retains the pristine white of snow or the green of wild grass, but is turned into a giant reddish-brown swamp, sticky and foul-smelling. Bodies of men and horses pile up on each other into mounds as high as the waist, creating a grotesque rough terrain woven from broken iron and crushed flesh. More than 30,000 soldiers of the Plains Empire have been completely wiped out from the world in just one day, burying forever the pride of an army that had never tasted failure. The rare survivors of the Empire army shedding heavy armor, fleeing in panic like ghosts deep into the cold old forests surrounding the valley. The fate awaiting them in that freezing winter night is no less cruel than death on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Highland warriors walk slowly amidst the messy battlefield, using long spears to stab the dying enemies to end the pain, and collecting sharp swords or intact armor as trophies. The giant war elephants, after a day of plowing and trampling the enemy formation, now stand silent like towering monuments of victory amidst the sea of bodies. Hot breath exhales from long trunks stained with dry red blood, mixing into the cold descending mist. Their presence is a living testament to the wild power that crushed the iron discipline of man. The battle at the Misty Valley has ended, engraving deep into military history a bloody lesson about arrogance and the price to pay for disregarding nature and bold tactics.